Morning. At the end of last session, we were talking about number of species around, and I said we'd do kind of a mathematical approach to see what's happening now, and focus on what we call invasive species. So let's kind of do an experiment, and we'll sort of do it by magic. We know at one point there was just one big continent, we call it Pangea. This broke up. There were big movements of tectonic plates, big ocean gaps developed, and we see our present configuration. So you have barriers of mountains, barriers of climate, barriers of water, and so the species in the different areas came to be quite different from each other over a long time. So let's do an experiment pretty much magically. We found an interesting relationship by studies in the islands around New Guinea. When you looked at the number of species of different birds, you found that the number of the various species changed according to the square root of the size of the island. This was be an area which had pretty consistent climate, no big barriers, so it was a pretty smooth series. And the square root, of course, is just the area. It doesn't matter what measure you use for it, miles, kilometers, so it's a dimensionless property. So let's do this experiment in our head. We take an island, big island. It has a certain number of species of birds on it, and we divide it exactly in four, and then just move the four parts away from each other. At first, you'll get some adjustment of which species are going to survive on each, which moved, and you're going to get decreasing numbers because each island is smaller. But if you've looked at them and put them back together very rapidly afterwards, you'd end up with about the same numbers for the total. However, if you separated them wildly so the birds couldn't go from one to the other, and you let a long time go by, you're going to get a lot of species changes. You're going to get some die out. You'll get new ones formed by genetic changes, and the appearance on each island is going to change. In any specific island, you have 1/4 the original number, so after a long time, you'll end up with 1/2 the original number. And if you were to add the 4 islands up, and time has gone by, so you just have wildly different species, you've end up in doubling the number of total species, which sounds fine. But then if you magically, after a long time, put them back together, you have twice as many species as should be there, and they battle it out, and eventually they get back to the original number for the whole island. But this is kind of a difficult process. The island can't handle as many species as were on it originally, and they fight it out, and half the species are going to disappear. So this is what's actually the biggest phenomenon that's occurring right now. It's not really that humans are trying to do this, but there's a lot of hitchhiking. Species move from place to place. They're going to battle it out. And inevitably, no matter what we do, we're going to get species loss because of this hitchhiking, the invasive species. And it's going to go on for a long, steady time. And we can do lots of attempts to preserve specific species, we're going to have a lot of species lost anyway. Now, you add to that process what humans do, again, not out of spite or anything, but they decide, well, hey, this going around and just hunting and gathering doesn't really work very well. So for the last 10,000 years, we've been altering things. We've been looking around for specific species, looking at grains, changing them. We're developing big areas of monoculture, and we are using pesticides, we are using plows and changing the soil. And over time, we are simply having areas where other species, other than the particularly favored species, are able to survive. So this process changes the habitat in which any kind of species, except the ones we want, are present. And this occurs when whether we open the fields and have agriculture. This changes whenever we go into forests, cut down a large part of it. So this crowds out other species. So we have the two major processes are this migration of species and fighting them out, and the loss of habitat. So the question is, what can we do about it? Well, we have to recognize that the process is inevitable, but we can cut down on it. And of course, the cut down of habitat is a very big area we can do something about, but hard. So in terms of species loss, the big variable now is habitat, habitat, habitat. It is very difficult to go and save a particular species unless it's a very widespread one, and it's maybe charismatic and we can do something about it. This does point on an area where we have a feeling we're doing something useful, but we don't. I think it's important in any discussion about what we're trying to do ecologically to be honest about it. And I'd like to try to point out something that we are doing that effectively is not really an honest procedure, and where the other side, the people who are fighting environmental protection, get very upset, and they have a point. And this area is our use of the legal system to try to cut down on habitat loss, and specifically to change obscure species, protect them, species that are going down the tubes, and we are taking massive steps to protect those species, which actually is really out of line. And I'll detail that process a little bit more at the next session, because the environmentalists, in which I consider myself one, have to do things that are practical and fair. It's possible for us, the good guys, to do something that's not fair. See you next time.